They grow up so fast. It feels like only yesterday I made my spotlight. This is a lie. 2020s felt like the Dark Souls of the 20th century. But forget that. Risk of Rain 2 is finally out of early access and has been released as a full product. For better or worse. That was a bit of a bait there. I really like Risk of Rain 2. I really like Risk of Rain 2. It's one of those games where you've had a stressful day, you barely crawl into your house, but you still got to see if today's the day you clear the highest difficulty. With that said, the full release still feels incomplete, and not even in the hidden kind of incomplete. They didn't even add in all the lore entries to all the existing items. It doesn't really put a damper on this section of the review though, because this game, story-wise, is very much like the first Risk of Rain, which you can check out here if you haven't already. TLDR, you're stranded on a planet, everything wants to kill you, try not to die, die several times. Not the deepest premise in all of gaming, but who cares, select your character and go shoot things. Now for those who do like a bit of lore seasoning, the logbook's lore entries are pretty spicy, telling small tales about all the different items and how holy crap they squished alien children with their landing ship. No wonder the parents are out for the player's blood. The general idea seems to be that a ship came to investigate what happened to the original Risk of Rain ship, aka the cargo ship carrying a butt ton of weird weapons, armaments, and the most powerful teddy bear gaming has ever seen. But if I'm being honest, I'm gonna wait for someone way smarter than me to compile all the lore into one nice comprehensive breakdown, because at a glance, we've got cults, time machines, and I think the Enforcer, my favorite character from the original game, may have died defending the survivors of the crash. Actually, technically none of the characters from the original were ever canonically on the Risk of Rain planet, with the exception of the Acrid, who is one of a kind and is unlocked in the first game by breaking him out of a cargo crate, and in the second by clearing the Void Fields, an area he probably got stuck in after killing a Void Reaper and getting yeeted by the ensuing suicide blast. But that's enough about lore. If you want to know more, just search Risk of Rain lore on YouTube. There are plenty of smaller channels who have devoted themselves to collecting all the scattered pieces and bits placed in the game lovingly by the developers. Now, let's talk visual and sound. I'm gonna start with sound because, to be blunt, Risk of Rain 2 can't hold a candle to its predecessor. Compared to Risk of Rain 1, both the music and the sound effects in general just do not feel as exciting. Explosions don't pop as much, gunshots don't have that kinetic bang, but that might be intentional, as sound does have a much bigger role in a 3D game. There are lots of enemies that will come at you from behind and just ruin your day, like jellyfish, the brass contraptions, or what my friends like to call the ninja. For someone so big, you'd think he'd make a lot more noise, but my point is, I understand downplaying the audio elements in the sequel. Still, while Risk of Rain 2's music is enjoyable as background music, Risk of Rain 1's music I could put in my car for a long drive, or have playing on the sound system while having some video games and chill with your gamer girlfriend. And then the boss shows up.
The usual, sir.
Honestly, this might be just a case of the game getting less indie and more professional, since the music of Risk of Rain 2 feels more consistent with its electronic space survival theme, while Risk of Rain 1 feels like a dude just set loose in a studio. One thing I will give the game credit for is that it still makes sure to give each item its own easily identifiable sound effect. even in the heat of battle, you can clearly tell what is happening just by the sound cues, and once you get pretty deep into a run, you can create quite the symphony of destruction. So while the sound and music isn't as sexy as Risk of Rain 1, it still works in service of the actual gameplay, and I commend them on that. Now, graphically speaking, I'm not too much of a visual snob. I think it looks decent. I mean, it isn't gonna blow people's minds or anything, or their computers at that, but it's a consistent art style. Where the game really shines though is in one word: presentation! The game's particle effects and the special effects in general are just a spectacle. Once you get far enough into a run, you will see your entire screen just light up with countless item effects and enemy attacks all around you. And for the most part, they are all unique, like the explosion of a gasoline is different from the explosion of a will-o'-the-wisp, which is different from the explosion of a shatter spleen, which is different from the explosion of a fireband. There is some serious attention to detail in the item effects. And on the topic of attention to detail, my favorite aspect of this game's visuals is the fact that items you acquire are all represented on your survivor's body. All of them, no exception. Pick up a pair of crit glasses, now your survivor looks like an anime villain. Pick up a bustling fungus, now they'll fit right in with the Last of Us crew. Grab a shield on the mercenary, well, congratulations, you have committed the unforgivable sin of wielding a katana with a shield, you disgusting monster. And best part, again, attention to detail. Many of the items are placed in very unique positions relative to the survivor being played. If you pick a backup mag on the soldier, they will show up on his guns. The Hard Life Afterburner, which is basically strapping a pair of rockets to whatever survivor you're playing as, the engineer places them on his shoulder-mounted grenade launchers. Why does this make sense, you ask? Well, aside from looking badass, the engineer also uses those launchers for his sprint animation. The Acrid even gets to run around with a giant slab of meat in his mouth. It's such a small novelty, but for a game like this, it just feels right, taking advantage of the 3D graphics available, while also showing a true evolution from the 2D LEGO graphics of the first game, where something like this just would not have been possible. TLDR, you're stranded on a planet, everything wants to kill you, try not to die, die several times.
Perfection.
This game is a third-person action game where you pick a survivor and try to complete all 5 stages. What makes it unique though are its roguelike elements. Or is it roguelite? I always get that confused. Anyways, the game has a lot of RNG in it. From what items you can acquire to what bosses you will fight, and even the stages themselves. But that's what you get with most roguelikes. So what makes the Risk of Rain, now series, stand out? 2 words: item stacking. Well, that and the fact that this title is specifically a third-person action title, when most roguelikes end up being RPGs or 2D titles, but mostly item stacking. Unlike its competition, you aren't just gathering a couple of powerful items in your quest for victory. Risk of Rain has you scouring the map for as many items as possible and as many copies of them at that, since in this game, item effects all stack on top of each other. You don't just want 1 pair of crit glasses, you want 10. This is what makes Risk of Rain fun and unique. It's almost impossible to have 2 runs with the exact same items. The downside of this is that runs can sometimes feel more like you're taking a ride on the SSRNG rather than, playing the game. But the devs have added in features that put more control in the player's hands this time around. In Risk of Rain 1, the only real choice you had in a run were the purchasable drones, event shrines, and the rare multi-shops. But in Risk of Rain 2, this idea got expanded, including all of the previously stated options, as well as new inclusions like the 3D printers, the scrappers, and many new types of shrines. 3D printers allow the player to spawn in as many copies of a specific item as they want by sacrificing a random item of the same quality, and scrappers allow the player to manually select an item to be turned into scrap, which then will be selected first when any other events start taking items from the player's inventory. Now I know that sounds a bit like extra steps, but here's the cool part. Neither of these machines are guaranteed to spawn on a level. Sometimes you might run into a 3D printer first, potentially losing an important item in your build, Sometimes you might run into a scrapper first, and have to decide if holding onto some useless scrap for later use would be worth losing a perfectly functional item. Those two are the really important additions, but the game also included a bunch of new shrines, while at the time of the 1.0 release, removing the old imp-killing minigame shrine. I'm not going to go into detail with each one though, as the surprise is part of the amazing first experience, but one shrine I will talk about is the Lunar Shrine, aka the Shrine of Order. Risk of Rain might seem like a game of weighing risk, but this is a good old-fashioned all-or-nothing gamble. A super rare shrine that takes away all your items and hands you back one item you previously had from each tier, multiplied by all the items you had in each tier. This, to be blunt, is a crapshoot. There is almost never a good reason to activate this shrine in general gameplay, as it only spawns later in the game when the player generally has a build chiseled out of all the random items they've collected. And being random, it could always give you a bunch of copies of the worst item you happen to have. But there's always that thought. What if it picks a good item? Do you know the power of 20 crowbars? How about 15 fungus on your turret? 10 missile launchers? Or maybe 4 ceremonial daggers.
これが僕のギャンブルだ。
にゃんにゃん、ギャンブル中毒の負け猫だにゃん。うっかり生徒会に負けちゃってさ、僕も借金しちゃったにゃん。
As with many loot-based games, there are several different tiers of items to be found, going from white to green to red to yellow, and finally, blue. A new tier added in Risk of Rain 2 called the Lunar Tier. So what are lunar items? Well, they're a unique set of items obtained primarily by spending a secondary currency,
Turning players into
that can only be attained through gameplay. You collect lunar coins randomly as you kill monsters, and it's one of the few elements of the game that stays in between runs. You can then use these items in rarely spawning areas to obtain lunar items, but most of them are not good, as the unique aspect of lunar items is that in exchange for a powerful effect, they all come with their own unique drawbacks that aren't really worth it. Over the course of early access, the devs seem to have understood some of the flaws with the lunar items, and the later ones added into the game were far better, like the item Focus Convergence, which reduces the size of the teleporter event, an area you need to stand in while fighting the boss in order to go to the next stage.
No, my queen!
Kill her quickly.
Oh god. That circle is a circle.
In exchange for making the event itself much shorter, saving time because, oh, I haven't even brought that up. Time in this game is the other thing that makes Risk of Rain stand out to the competition. You see that there? That's the true final boss of the game. During early access, people thought we didn't have any sort of final boss, but in reality,
Surprise.
the boss was always there, watching you, planning your demise, ready to execute it at any point in time. Simply put, as you play the game, it gets more difficult. Now let's talk survivors. Most of them are pretty great. You have 10 in total, but start out only with the commando. This dude will see you through the entire game just by himself. He is safe, plays like a generic FPS soldier, and scales great with items. Later on, you will unlock characters like the turret-wielding engineer, whose turrets get all the items he does and look awesome in the process, as well as the Huntress wielding a booty-like POW that drives all the artists crazy. Now how'd that get into the script? As well as the Huntress wielding a freaking laser bow and can shoot while sprinting just as she could in Risk of Rain 1. My favorite character though is the newcomer, the Artificer. Is that really how you pronounce it? Artificer sounds way cooler. Who, aside from being best girl, maintained my #1 slot throughout early access due to her really cool elemental theme. She just dunks on enemies with massive burst damage rather than chipping away at them with rapid shots. She had a few issues with her playstyle back when the game was in early access, but by 1.0 most of them have been fixed, except for one glaring flaw that I will never understand. She doesn't scale any better with Deathmark than any other character in the game. It's literally an elementalist wet dream, what the hell? Deathmark is an item that gives a whopping 50% increase in damage to enemies that have 4 or more debuffs. It's balanced by the fact that getting the specific items required to place 4 different debuffs on a target isn't all that easy, but some characters have natural debuffs to make the item more accessible. The Artificer isn't one of these, because her natural debuff is the burn debuff, the easiest debuff to get from items. What that means is while other survivors can use their natural debuffs and an easy to acquire burn debuff to get halfway to the promised land, the Artificer kneecaps herself by omitting only the easiest part of the journey. And her other debuff, Freeze, isn't a debuff in the eyes of Deathmark. My other favorite character who took the spot after the 1.0 release is the Captain. The Captain is a certified badass wielding a shotgun arm and dropping airstrikes from a spaceship floating above the planet. This guy is a straight powerhouse and similar to the Artificer, devotes all his action buttons to offense. The only downside is that when he goes to any of the secret areas, he loses contact with his ship, effectively removing half of his kit. I understand why they did this logic-wise, and I even think it's a cool idea, but a lot of people have complained about this since the remaining part of his kit isn't all that exciting. With that said, playing the Captain in general is amazing, 10/10 hands down. There are other survivors I could talk about, but the last one I'll bring up is the one who highlights another issue with the game, the Acrid. The Acrid is this blighted mutant-like creature whose playstyle is all about jumping into the fray, beating up enemies and poisoning everything around him. He's also the goodest boy. Here's the thing though, he's supposed to feel like this incredible Hulk massacring fools in some insane angry fury, but in reality, this is what your late game actually looks like. He's just not built for melee. I mean, sure, he has melee attacks, but not much to keep him alive in close quarters combat. Whenever I'm playing this game with my friends and one of them chooses the Acrid, they always end up playing him at a range just to stay alive past the early stages, despite the fact that 2 out of 4 moves are melee oriented. It's the Captain problem again, except now it's every stage. Because it's fun to have overpowered things. It's just that everything else is underpowered. Multiplayer is another topic I should talk about, because this game has it, unlike Risk of Rain 1. What do you mean? It's right there.
Do you know how to port forward?
Yes.
Do your friends?
No.
There is no multiplayer.
Careful. A ninja.
Yeah, I see him.
Elite ninja.
Yeah, I am well aware.
I'm holding him steady.
I am here.
Kill him. Thank you.
I was throwing as much damage as I could. I don't have much.
The multiplayer is just fun and as crazy as you would expect, with enemy, loot, chest, and boss rewards all scaled up to 4 players. The only, and I mean only issue I see...
What I would give for a ukulele?
It's free real estate.
Holy shit, stop shooting me! Is that when someone dies, they pretty much fall behind unless the party agrees to beeline it to the boss, and even then, this just makes everyone weaker in the face of Father Time. I don't know what the devs could do about that, but regardless, multiplayer is a blast with everyone creating crazy different builds, laughing together about terrible drops, arguing about whether or not to risk doubling up on the boss event for more loot. I'm particularly bad with that one. Do this. There are 2 Shrine of the Mountains on this stage. I mean, there are 3. There are 3 Shrine of the Mountains in total. We can do
Who are in
this.
charge of killing all the elites? Please don't be worms.
Oh, that's way worse. And it's just a textbook case of a good game getting better with friends. Eventually though, the formula can get stale, but the devs rightfully implemented a feature into the game that extends its variety greatly. Artifacts. These unlockable modifiers can greatly change the game, making it either easier or harder depending on what you select. Something like Command basically trivializes the game, allowing you to take most of the RNG out of it and select your own items. On the flip side, the artifact of Swarms doubles all the spawns in the game, but halves their HP to give the player a fighting chance. This takes the few downtime moments in the game and throws them out the window with endless waves of enemies trying to overwhelm you. Super fun, and sure, not all the artifacts are as exciting, looking at you, fall damage artifact, but there are plenty to find, and the method required to obtain them even has applications in non-artifact runs, giving you more things to do in general. Okay, bonus section. Let's talk about the early access. That is fair. And real talk, before I took the plunge, I had several big reservations just due to the publisher they attached themselves to. But I want to talk about it because there are a few things that came across to me as questionable and still remain at the time of the 1.0 release. Okay, lightning round. To start, I honestly think this game was released at about 85% completion. There are still a few gaps in the gameplay that I thought would be filled in by now, like the shop. Almost every roguelike has a shop, and Risk of Rain is no exception, but you know one thing you can do in those shops? Kill the shopkeeper. And to be fair, you can do that in Risk of Rain too, but you don't get anything for it. The shopkeeper just respawns, and it's not like the devs don't expect people to try to kill it, because failing to do so fast enough causes the shopkeeper to lock you out for the rest of the run. But, at least at the moment, there's no reward. Hopefully it'll get patched in at some point. There's also the Heresy Items, started in the second update, and at the time of the 1.0 release, only has 2 pieces of what I assume will be either a 4 or 5 piece set, allowing you to replace your abilities with lunar ones, and maybe once you complete the set, it might cause a transformation Binding of Isaac style, I don't know. Then there's the skill variants. But while I was hoping for every character to have like 2 new options for all their abilities, not a single character has a full set of alternates in their default kit. I do appreciate the inclusion of alternates though, since the modding community has seen plenty of use for this functionality. And yes, this game does have a pretty strong modding community, with some really hype creations. How much do you cost? No, I'm not pinging the chest, I'm pinging—
Oh, yes! I hate this! It is revolting! More? Please.
But that's a topic for a separate video. Finally, just having more challenges in general is what I wanted, as a lot of Risk of Rain 2's goal-oriented fun, you know, not the just fuck around fun, comes from them, and it does worry me that the devs throughout early access seem to shift to having less challenges in order to just give people more content up front. Your mileage may vary, but I like the hunt. Hopefully these things get added into the game eventually, as well as some other things like more random events and stages like Rally Point Delta does, which by the way is the best designed stage in my mind, and maybe some more items for shield usage, since the mechanic feels a bit weak and underutilized. My biggest worry though is if we get any new content and how. Like the devs say they're supporting the game well beyond 1.0, and I believe them. They did the same for Risk of Rain 1, that game didn't even have artifacts at launch. But will the content come in the form of updates? Or DLC? That's the real question, and we will just have to wait and see what they do. Risk of Rain 2 is just the most fun I've had with a video game in 2020, hands down. Killing things feels satisfying, collecting items feels super satisfying, and every run feels just a little bit different every time. I think there's room for improvement when it comes to the balancing of certain items, but it's not crazy noticeable outside of the whole accurate as a ranged character thing. And heck, I didn't even mention the alternate modes they put into the game, like the Prismatic Trials with weekly preset item spawns, and the new Eclipse mode which gives stacking difficulty bonuses as you win. Why didn't I bring them up earlier? Because I can't beat either one of them, not for lack of trying mind you, but these modes add even more replayability to an already addicting formula, and you know how much I like replayability. So, with all that said, you have probably already guessed it, but Risk of Rain 2 for the price of $24.99? This shit isn't even a $30 product? Oh my god, I actually forgot that I didn't pay a higher premium for this game. At $24.99, this game is an easy steal plus. This game is probably going to be my game of the year, and if they release a single content update before January hits, it will be almost guaranteed. Buy this game, have some fun, install some mods, have even more fun. And you know what, just to put a pin on my earlier comments in the story section, style-wise, Risk of Rain 1 still holds the crown. But as a video game, Risk of Rain 2 has taken the throne. Like and sub for more content, maybe throw $1 at me on Subscribestar or Patreon, and I will see you guys next time. Peace!